Thank you for being here.
You bet, it's an honor. Again, my name is Kelly Clark. I go by KC, the initials, and live there in Navajo County. And I've been, I'm not born and raised in Arizona, but most of my life I've lived here. So originally came out of Texas and then moved back and forth a little bit between Nevada and here, but not quite a native, but most of my family is. You know, some of my interests that I have are gardening. I love ATV, UTVing out in the woods, hunting, fishing, hiking, my family, my children, and my lone granddaughter. My kids are pretty stingy with the grandkids right now. They've only given me one, and I have 5 children, so hopefully I get some more. My capabilities for this position is I'm a very good listener. I'm a consensus builder. I have ability to get along, and I'm passionate on whatever I take on. And I don't give 100% to anything I do, I give 110%. I'm very careful about anything that I do take on so that I don't, any commission or any kind of appointment that I have, so that I make sure that I give it the time that's needed to be on that particular board or commission. Right now I'm on the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission in the Arizona HIDA, which is the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Executive Board. So I've only missed, in all those years, I've missed 1 meeting at the ACJC and 1 at HIDA. Again, because I give 110% and I don't overextend myself. Qualifications, I'm an Arizona hunter and fisherman. This time last week, I was sitting in the Matazels looking down across the wilderness at deer, javelinas, quail, coyotes, trying to figure out how to get a 600 or 700 shot in, 700-yard shot, and I didn't get one. But I'm an avid hunter, not so much fisherman, but some fishermen, done some fishing. I have been 3 times, I think I'm the only person in the state 3 times I've been elected to the Arizona County Attorney Sheriff's Association as president. I've been president once of the Arizona Sheriff's Association. I've been the chairman of the Homeland Security RAC in Navajo County. Again, I'm on the ACJC and the HIDA committee. But I think one of my biggest qualifications is that people that know me and my ability to get along and to know that compromise is not a bad word, is that nobody's ever going to get their 100% own way. But if you can each go away a little bit, thinking that I don't know if one is the right term or not, I think you get stuff done. My goals, if I was fortunate enough to be selected, I would like to look into, I think there's some real problems across the state of Arizona right now on ATV, UTV laws. I don't think that we've kept up with them. We're having people injured and killed every day in our counties, and I think that we need to work on that a little bit. So I'd really, that's a passion of mine that I'd like to work on. Travel management, I've been working with Game and Fish on that for some time. When I was president of the Sheriff's Association, we partnered with Game and Fish, went over to Albuquerque, and I think that we made some strides there. I think things slowed down in travel management, at least in Navajo County. There's some change in Coconino County over that. So I think that that's another thing that I'm very, very passionate and interested about. I think we need to keep our forests open to everybody, whether you're a hiker, a hunter, ATV. I think that that's very important. I think that I don't know if you've ever been up on the 300 road up by Willow Springs, but you go up there and you can camp 50 feet off the road, and there's tent after tent after tent after tent of people camping up there, and then but there's other roads that they're closing down where I and my family have camped for years. I think that we need to disperse that a little bit, so that's something I'd really like to work on. I want to be a good partner, and I want to learn as much as I can about the issues facing the department that are currently facing it as quickly as I can to get on board and to work with the commission for the citizens of this great state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Casey. If that's, we're going to go for a series of questions, as you may have already been indicated to you, and we'll start with Member Kelly. All right.
Thank you, Chairman Lane. Casey, first of all, good morning. Thanks for coming in and speaking with us. Could you please share with the recommendation board your hunting and fishing experiences while you've been here in the state of Arizona, and how they might benefit you in the role of a commissioner if you were selected?
You know, I've hunted lions, I've hunted bears, I had dogs, ran in my youth, I ran blue tech hounds for lion and bear, hunted elk, deer, quail, of course, jackrabbits, dove, cottontail. I've done archery hunting, rifle hunting. I brought my fish, a small boat, we go up on the rim lakes and do quite a bit of trout fishing up in that area. I've taught my kids that. You know, I remember my son was about 6 years old. We took him out up on the 225 road, which is out north of Winslow, and by Wiggins Crossing, if you know where that's at. So we were archery hunting, and we got up in we had a little blind, and son's 6 years old, and he said, "There's something moving over there, Dad." And I looked, and it was this huge elk coming towards us, about 5-point, 6-point elk, and I mean, it walked up as close as we are to you and I. It was sitting there staring at us, and I said, "Don't move." And we sat there, and it kind of looked at us, and it walked away, and my son said, "Why didn't you shoot it, Dad?" I said, "Well, it's an elk, we're deer hunting." But he said, "Well, I'm shaking." I'm like, "Me too." You know, I've taken my daughters out. I have 3 daughters and two sons. The 2 sons are more avid hunters and fishermen with me. The daughters do more hiking and some fishing. But I think that it's what's that's done for them. It's they're all very avid. They love camping. We camped all the time growing up. But I think it brought it kept them out of trouble. It gave them a love for the entire state. I hunted from Sonoyta to the Kaibab and places in between, and my kids have gone with me. So I think it gives me a good idea of the state, the diversity of it. When I was hunting last week, I met a gentleman in Tonto Basin, and he said that he lives in Payson, but he kept a RV in Tonto Basin. I'm like, "Well, that's only 30 minutes away. Why?" And he said, "Well, that's the great thing about this state is that you, in 30 minutes, I can be at 2,200 foot elevation, or in 30 minutes, I can be at 7,000 up at Willow Springs." And I think that's my hunting experience.
Thanks, Casey. I'll give the others a opportunity to ask you a couple of questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Member Kelly. Member Chilton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you for being present. You probably have quite a bit of experience with this next question, so I'll be interested in your response. You surely have seen that federal agencies have responsibility for certain aspects of management in Arizona in terms of the national forests, the parks, the BLM, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and other such entities. And then the state of Arizona has responsibility for management of wildlife and conservation of wildlife. These two groups need to interact constructively. And do you have observations on how that could come to pass?
Well, I believe that local control is best control, whether it's a city council, sheriff, Arizona Game and Fish, Comparative Fish and Wildlife. We all have our roles, but local control is best control. we know what we need in our counties, in our state, in our cities. In Navajo County, I think that we've had a very good relationship with, I work more with the Forest Service. There's only law enforcement on the Forest Service, there's only a few of them, so we have to be good partners. They're our backup, we're their backup. Game and Fish, we're great partners with them. FBI, DEA, so forth. BLM, we don't have a whole lot of BLM land there in Navajo County, but we've done some cases with them. I think they all know my position on that is that, again, local control. I don't want you coming in my county telling me what I need to do. And it's not so much the local agents, it's some bureaucrat in DC that has no clue, never been to Arizona probably, and no doubt in Navajo County. So, again, I'm a consensus builder, and I've worked well with all those people. We've not had any issues to speak of. Travel management comes into Navajo County. There's going to be problems if I'm sheriff. And what I mean by that is that I'm not going to work with them anymore. They're going to have to figure out. Right now, the Forest Service depends on us for radio traffic and a lot of other stuff. I'm not going to help them cite people for going on roads that are closed, that aren't signed. But I've made that pretty clear, and I think we have good partnerships.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your answer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Member Sheldon. Sheriff Casey, if I might, my interest really is in your background as it relates to how we meet the mission of the Game and Fish Commission. And how does your background, and I'll specifically to the point of your position as sheriff, how does that lend itself, or how does that affect your thinking as it relates to the full constituency of folks in the state of Arizona as it relates to that mission?
I think the position of sheriff gives me, first of all, it's I've had to learn to make really tough decisions very quickly in a political environment that really I don't believe a sheriff should be in a political environment, but you have to look at that. Make life and death decisions, literally. So I'm not afraid to make decisions, which I think would be a benefit to the board under my own person. I think that the commission has several different roles. Obviously, you're a biologist, or you still have a law enforcement component to this also, to the commission, where they look at people, whether to do revocation and so forth. I think I bring a wealth of experience of knowing how the legislature works. Also having built relationships at the federal level, including Washington, and at the state level, across the state.
When it comes, follow up on that, just when it comes to the mission itself, and I appreciate your perspective as it's been expressed, but do you see it as political answers, or do you see it as management and practical answers? And maybe that's sort of a loaded question as it goes to that. But the environment, opinions on how we go about things are certainly considered either opinions or a political opinion. But in addressing that, staying to the mission and the practicality of answers, how often, how does that become maybe distorted in your mind politically?
Well, I think that I would hope it does not become political at any point. I think that the Game and Fish has done a great job in this state. It's done off of science. It's not done willy-nilly. And so I think that that's how I would approach it as I learn more about it. But I think it's the Game and Fish has done very well. Perfect example is the elk out here. 86 of them were brought here. We now have one of the best herds in the state. That's science.
Thank you, Casey. Member Townsend.
Thank you. Sheriff, we appreciate you being here and being willing to serve. Thank you. My question for you is, with current revenue streams not projected to keep up with base funding requirements, just to keep the current agency programs and services intact, what ideas or concepts have you contemplated about driving new revenues to the department?
You know, not a whole lot, to be honest. One of the things that I have thought about, which is probably wouldn't work, but I'm willing to give it a shot, is go to our state, the legislature. I know that there's no general fund money to the Arizona Game and Fish Commission based off your licenses and taxes and so forth. But much like the Arizona Criminal Justice Commission, the revenues have fallen down for different funds that we get for law enforcement and so forth. And we're looking to go to the state for the Arizona Post. Post is what licenses police officers. There's been no general fund money ever given to them either. And if you want professional game management, if you want professional law enforcement, then I think the state needs to pony up some money. And I'd be willing to work on that very hard. You know, I think that the Game and Fish Department does a good job reaching out to youth, but I know that licenses are down right now. I think that could be somewhat due to our economy. Hopefully, you know, the projections you said are looking down, but you know, if our economy gets better, maybe people will start hunting and fishing more again. But our society's changed a little bit. I don't think as many people are out there doing what I did growing up, and I brought my kids up to do. But I think we could do some more youth outreach also, which folks do a good job now, but try to do more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Townsend. Member Williams.
Thank you, Chairman Lane. First of all, Sheriff Clark, let me thank you for your service as a sheriff, and thank you for your interest in this position. Sheriff Clark, would you please explain the importance of the North American model of wildlife conservation as it pertains to Arizona Game and Fish Department and the Commission?
Sir, if I tried to answer that, you'd know I was just trying to BS you, so I have no idea.
Okay, I appreciate your honesty. No further question.
All right. Thank you, Member Williams. Member Kelly, for a second.
Thank you, Chairman Lane. Sheriff, what are your thoughts on the ever-increasing wild horse and wild burro populations here in the state of Arizona? Do you have any suggestions on what additional steps the Commission and Department could take to control their ever-expanding numbers and the damage they're doing to sensitive riparian areas, much to the detriment of a lot of our indigenous species here in Arizona?
You know, I'm not a fan of when you say wild horses, those are horses that escaped off of reservations and so forth, especially in Navajo County from fires. And they're tearing up the woods. There could be some type of chemical castration, but at the very end, you know, Roundup. I know there've been some Roundups from the BLM, so forth. But a lot of those horses are just sitting in pens across the United States, which is not good either. I think that at the very end, much like the bison that they're talking about now in the Grand Canyon, unfortunately, gonna probably have to do some thinning of the herds.
Thank you. No follow-up on that.
Thank you, Member Kelly. Member Children.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sheriff. Probably in Navajo County, certainly the county that I'm from, which is Pima, and in a large part of the state, the sheep and cattle ranchers are the day-to-day, on-the-ground people who put the water and the salt and manage the land, along with the within the format that the federal agencies or the state land department set up. And much of Arizona's state land and another part is federal land, and that's between the Forest Service and BLM and parks and various other entities. But the effort to manage wildlife is carried out on the ground largely by the ranchers because they're there day to day. How would you suggest that we increase the work, say the effectiveness of the Landowner Lessee Sportsman's Relations Committee and other efforts to try to bring together the ranchers and the hunters so that access to remote lands through private property is more available for a larger part of the population?
You know, you're right. The ranchers are America's first conservationists. They're the ones that they know agriculture. They know how to keep animals going on the land. In Navajo County, we're pretty lucky on the ranchers. I mean, you have Jim Oaxaca over in Winslow, and you know, he's partnered with Game and Fish, and you sign on to go on his ranch, and worked out well. You have some other areas in the county that have that. Bill Jeffers has got some areas out there north of Holbrook. And he's very generous with the getting onto his ranch. There's got some sand dunes out there that kids like to go out to and take their ATVs on. So I've not seen a real problem with that in Navajo County. If there's other parts of that in the state, then say model it after what the people in Navajo County are doing, which has worked out. I've never been denied access, and not because I'm sheriff. I've just been able to pretty well go anywhere I want.
Thank you. I have to say that's the subject I worked on when I was on the commission, and I'm happy to hear that access from your perspective is pretty well available. I think it is largely, and I was just looking to see if you had ideas on how to increase and bridge that relationship between the land managers, the private landowners, the sportsmen, and to further it.
You know, and I think some of that you have to, some of the ranchers, I mean, I'll go back to the Oaxacas sometime during the elk season. He's got some different line shacks out there, and people will, unethical hunters will have stolen from them and stuff like that. And I think that we, Operation Game Thief, make sure that people report that kind of stuff so that the ranchers still feel comfortable letting people on. But I wouldn't want people on my ranch that are shooting my cattle, cutting my fences, stealing from my line shacks and so forth. But anyway, it's worked out well, and I've not always been sheriff. So,
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you, Member Chilton. I'm going to pass on the second question, so Member Townsend.
Thank you. There's been a lot of discussion about hunter ethics and fair chase in the pursuit of game. What is your position on fair chase and any specifics about what you believe a commission can do related to this issue?
Fair chase, even from a vehicle? I mean, if it's from a vehicle, I'm absolutely opposed to it.
Or technology, using advanced technology.
You know, I think one of the things, I just talked to Game and Fish officer there out of Pine Top. We were talking about that, and you know, as I've gone around hunting the last few years, you can't go to a water hole. There's not a blind on or a camera on, and I'm opposed to that. I think we need to get that under control. I think there's too many cameras at the water holes. I think there's too many blinds. So I think, I'm not sure what the solution is there, as we talked, but that's something that I'd be very interested in. I just think there's too much of that, and there's too many cameras. That's fair chase. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Member Townsend. Member Williams.
Thank you, Chairman Lane. Sheriff Clark, how does the public trust doctrine pertain to the Arizona Game and Fish Department?
If I understand understand the question. I believe the public trust doctrine, I think the Game and Fish Department and Arizona Game and Fish Department does a pretty good job at that here. I think that the most part, the citizens of this state trust Arizona Game and Fish. I think that they've proven over and over that their decisions are based on science for game management. I think there's been a lot of outreach. I think your shooting ranges and so forth have a good public response to that. So I think that overall, it's been a good public outreach. The hunting and fishing, the hunting courses that you take your kids to, great people there. That always gives a good reputation to the department.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Member Williams, and that does complete our questioning for you, Sheriff. So thank you very much for the presentation and for your answers to the questions.
Thank you. Have a good day.
With that, I'd ask that Bobby Cooper brought in for the interview process.